All right, everybody. Stocks by the numbers. Welcome back. Quick update here. We have some news coming out for Intel Corporation, ticker symbol INTC, listed here on the NASDAQ. I was going to do a video about maybe like 2 hours ago, later in the afternoon, talking about the news that came out on Intel. And I don't know, something told me, you know what, wait for after the market closes. We'll do a recap on Intel. And then boom, we have news come out after hours on Intel, sending it even higher. So let's find out what's going on. Stock closed a touch below 21 on news of potential $3.5 billion government funding coming in for a secret government project that they told us about. So quite an oxymoron right there. But 2091 on the close. Broke above 21 here by a couple of cents, closed up exactly 1.25 point, roughly 6.33%. Now, after hours, we have more news coming in. Stock currently sitting at 22.5, up over a 1.5, or about 7.5% here running after hours. So let's find out what's going on. Again, initially, this run up today was from the potential $3.5 billion in funding, which they're saying is going to be like officially quote unquote announced maybe over the next week or so. And they're basically saying that Intel right now is the front runner. So if obviously they get a couple of $1 billion and a government order, the stock's going to go up, and there you go. So that's why we were excited today. In my eyes, after hours now, looks like a potential bull flagging, and I think we're going to pop up. I think we go back to about 24, 25 in my opinion now, just off of this news that came in. So first of all, Dow closes record high. Of course, why not? Intel lays out steps for cost cutting. They were speaking about potentially kind of spinning off and just kind of separating the two businesses and having the foundry segment that actually manufactures the chips to be kind of independent and stand alone, right? So that tells us two things. Number one, if an order, new orders, if new orders, new contracts come in my opinion, if they spin it off into two stocks, then the foundry segment will see an initial pop. However, the main concern that Wall Street had for Intel stock overall was the kind of accrued expenses that were taking place on the foundry segment side itself. So, in my opinion, if we do happen to have a spin-off, I would take the actual kind of parent company umbrella in my eyes right now, as opposed to the foundry segment. But, you know, obviously we know that all of that can change over time, and we could, of course, come back and look at both of them down the road. But Intel said it would further separate its chip manufacturing and design operations as part of a new raft of measures to weather one of the most significant crises in 5-decade history. Also pausing factory projects in Germany and Poland for 2 years and putting a manufacturing project in Malaysia on hold until demand picks back up. The company will also slash the number of office locations. Okay, so in my opinion, I believe these moves are made for the next 12 months. And obviously a statement like that, you say, yeah, no shit. But also what I'm saying is, not only are these moves being made for the kind of health of Intel and the business and the stock, but also they're, as you see, pausing projects overseas. And why would they pause projects overseas? Well, because in about 2 months we have an election. And we know that if Trump gets in, chances are, in my opinion anyway, tariffs are going up across the board. So this is why I feel that Intel is making these moves now. They're trying to separate the foundry segment from the other business segments, and they want to kind of spin off those losses and those concerns to the foundry side, but they want to keep the overall business healthy and looking intact. Right? And now we're getting a couple of billion coming in potentially for the CHIPS Act they were talking about. And now you have this $3.5 billion in government funding for this secret project that they just told us about. But also, again, if the tariffs are going to be increased, then Intel is now moving and shifting its focus strictly to its domestic business here in the States, which will in turn generate the higher profit margins because they're not going to get tariffed 100+% on the imports coming from Germany, Poland, Malaysia, right? We already know. Honestly, even if it's not all these countries across the board, all of these locations, in my eyes, I think, you know, Trump's a little upset with Germany, but I don't want to go down that road. I know there was the talks about the NATO contributions, and he was talking about how much their economy actually generates, and the small percentage of their GDP that they were actually contributing to NATO. So I know there was a slight issue there, but obviously that's kind of old news. But just kind of trying to lay out potential future scenarios for you so that we can see where this stock could be, 12, 18 months from now. But has been gradually separating Intel's manufacturing and chip design operations after making the company's factories available to outside circuit designers shortly after taking the role. Manufacturing operations started to report separate financial results this year, but they will now become an independent subsidiary under Intel. Ensuring the separations will allow manufacturing arm to get financially independently, ally customers. Okay. Analysts have encouraged Intel to consider. Intel also said it reached a multi-billion-dollar agreement for Amazon.com's cloud computing arm to manufacture chips at Intel factories using an advanced chip-making technology expected to go into production next year. Intel will also make custom versions of its server chips for Amazon. Awarded up to $3 billion by the Biden administration to build manufacturing for the U.S. defense industry, confirming a win, largely expected. News helped fuel. Shares up. Cutting thousands of jobs, slashing costs. So yeah, so the last time we looked at this stock was about 6 weeks ago when they reported earnings. And again, it was a pretty rough report for Intel. And then they made the announcement that now they're going to have some layoffs. Excuse me. So Intel dropped down hard. It went from the high 20s down to the high teens, and it dropped to 18.5 and hit new lows. And this is why I always say that, in my opinion, the Buffett method is the best. Because, again, this is a brand name company. They've been around for decades, as they say, and this is like the biggest issue they've run in since day one. And now they have to do some restructuring, so everyone beats it up on Wall Street. Everyone takes their eyes off of it. The stock hits new lows, and even you have newer, not to beat some of you up, but newer, amateur investors online even getting the story trending, and they're putting in their 2 cents. And, you see things like, oh, AMD took a chunk of the market share, Intel's done, like that's old news, that's old tech, nobody wants it. And now all of a sudden you're getting these articles coming out just consistently, one after another. Oh, we're getting a couple of billion for this. Now we're getting a couple of billion for that. We just got an order from the government, right? So now all of a sudden it's back in the spotlight. And that's why I always say, even if you started buying shares of Intel before those earnings came out, and you started to piece your way in at like 29, 28, and then it dropped down to 18, I know it really hurts. And you may initially turn around and say, oh my goodness, like I knew I shouldn't have did it, or oh, I have the worst luck, right? I always pick the worst time to buy something. This is why I say, if you're able to piece your way in, DCA, dollar cost average your way down, lower the cost basis, and you're able to just hang on and ride that rebound wave, then chances are, more times than not, it's going to work out well for you. And we have other examples. Even something like Verizon, which I was going to do an update on, right? They brought it down to 30 new lows. Again, same thing. Oh, it's going out of business. It's an old school company. They're behind the curve. Now, all of a sudden, the stock's hitting new highs today above $45. So, was it slow? Was it boring? Yes. But at the same time, if you had a big chunk of capital in a longer term kind of time horizon account that you wanted to put somewhere that can be kind of quote unquote secure and maybe pay you dividends and just slowly grow over time, and it be one of the quote unquote closest things to a guarantee, if you will, then yeah, buying something like Verizon when it got beat up, as you see, would have now yielded about 50% gains. You would have got paid dividends the whole time to own it, and you're approaching the 12-month time frame, so you're potentially about to pay roughly half the amount in capital gains tax now. So this is why I say, in my opinion, slow and steady wins the race, and you're much better off working smarter, not harder. But again, if you're, a smaller account trader, you're sitting there with like 1 or 2 grand or whatever, then obviously I understand it's more difficult and you may be on the trading side more with the options. But we know that. We know everyone's different. But this is phenomenal news. This is absolutely phenomenal news. Intel was given a preliminary award of up to $8.5 billion through the CHIPS Act of 2022. So this is why now we're starting to flow again. And it's funny that it happens right after one of their worst quarters, right? This is why I always say, in my opinion, the Buffett method really does seem to come through more times than not. Something like Intel gets beaten up, they're hitting new lows. Okay, that's when you start to buy. That's when you consistently accumulate shares. And then all it takes is, one or two announcements like this, and then boom, now you're off to the races. All of a sudden the stock rebounded and it's back to what your cost is. All of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, oh wow, now I'm up 5%. Now I'm up 7%, right? So what was initially viewed as a poor investment and a poor decision is now working out for you. That's why I always say, when they beat up a stock like Coca-Cola, you should buy the dips, in my eyes. Beat up a stock like Hershey, buy the dips. Verizon, buy the dips, right? These are brand name companies, and in my opinion, they are not going anywhere. And I know people go back to like 2008 and like some of the investment firms that went under. But remember, that's different because that's finance. That's about investments, debt they're holding on their balance sheet, what they're liable for, right? What assets they're actually holding. Everyone was involved into the real estate bundles, but it turned out that all the real estate was trash that they were holding in the bundles. So it's not worth as much as everyone thought it was. So now they're in the hole for 30 billion instead of 2 billion that they thought they were, right? You understand? So it was like a hodgepodge of negativity. But when we're talking about actual concrete business, like something physical, then chances are it's going to be buoyed, if you will. It's going to be kept up. It's going to be maintained. That's why Intel's selling off to 18.5 new lows. In my opinion, that's when you start accumulating. They were saying Ford was potentially going out of business, but Ford actually makes something, right? They actually make cars. So that's why, like, Ford got bailed out, right? That's what I mean. Something like Ford's going to get bailed out. Something like Lehman Brothers is going to be left to the wayside. And the only reason more investment banks didn't fail is because A, they knew it would spiral the markets lower, and B, they were healthy enough and weren't as exposed as Lehman, so they were able to just like merge and acquire each other and keep each other afloat, mixing the investment banks with the actual physical banks. One has the investments, one has the cash arm. Boom, you bring it together, right? Now you're a stronger institution. So that's why a lot of these companies, much different than other companies that you may have read about and heard about that went out of business back in the day or went belly up, whatever it was. But yeah, so $3 billion federal funding. Anyway, I go off on rants, but semiconductors, part of the CHIPS Act, aims to secure a domestic supply of advanced chips critical for defense and intelligence purposes. Because again, remember, as much as we like Taiwan Semiconductor, TSM, that we just looked at, yes, it's phenomenal, and chances are it's probably going to keep growing over time. But remember, people are speculating about China potentially invading Taiwan. And this is why I always say, in my opinion, I'm always a little hesitant to buy stocks overseas. Because again, throughout South America, there were nationalization issues back in the day. And now you have over in Asia, again, if we have potential more turmoil going off, right? We have Russia dealing with Ukraine, but while everyone's distracted, if China potentially invades Taiwan, right? That's why, even if TSM is an absolutely solid company, which in my opinion it is, if we hear tomorrow that China is invading Taiwan, the stock's going to drop massively. I'm sure we can agree. So that's why we know anything can happen. But I have learned that something like Intel here, domestic, they actually produce something, right? They went out of the spotlight, they're getting beaten up. Usually 9 times out of 10, it seems to work out where if you step in and you start to accumulate and buy that deep discounted stock and just hold it and hang it out for a rainy day, it usually ends up working out for you more times than not. But this comes on top of it already proposed $8.5 billion in grants, $11 billion in loans. Intel's negotiating under the broader CHIPS Act. Intel announced strategic collaboration with Amazon Web Services, multi-year, multi-billion-dollar framework. So in my opinion, this is really just phenomenal. I mean, you get a positive catalyst announcement, boom, mixed with now Amazon. And of course, because it's Amazon, it's going to fuel the rebound even further. Right? You understand? We know that certain companies carry certain weights with them. And if Intel signed, some random tech company for whatever, $1 billion order, would the stock have gone up? Well, of course, right? Because it's good news. It's money coming in. It's a new order. But also at the same time, the gravity of the move is going to be determined by who the actual client is, right? Did a big tech company place the order? Was it a Google? Was it an Amazon? When those companies place orders, it's huge. Just like how you can see all the articles beating up Intel because they lost the Sony contract with the PlayStation 6, right? That's what I mean. Sony, big name, PlayStation 6, popular product, right? You lose that. It's a big issue. But if you get that, it's a big positive. So that's why, a couple of billion over a couple of years might not be too big of a deal, but because it's with Amazon, that's why the stock's seeing a 6-7% pop now after hours. Stock up, in my opinion, potentially bull flagging. But let's back out here. And you can see we dropped down right to this bottom support trend line that I had drawn out here on the gap down. We came up, rejected off of it, came up to try to retest it. Now you can see after hours right here, stock about 22.5. It's sitting basically right at the 20-day moving average, got back above it. And you can see if we were to extend this line out, we're now above this bottom support trend line. So now off of this news, and in my opinion now, new volume going to come back into INTC, in my opinion, right here, could potentially gap fill back up to about 29. But right here, this trend line should be the next stop, which as you see, looking like about 27 and change. So that's why if you got in early here and then had the big drop, this is why I always say, in my opinion, you should view that as an opportunity, not as a negative. Because if you felt it was a decent investment and a good longer term buy at 28.29, now it's at 19, like I say, yeah, it sucks, but if you liked it at 29, you should be in love with it at 19. And we crunched some of the numbers last time, and that's why I said back here that, long term, it probably could work out, in my opinion. And we felt that it was potentially even undervalued at the time. And again, that was like back here. So, that's why now with some news slowly trickling in, if, in my opinion, Trump wins the election, then you're probably going to want to start moving the money into domestic, American, manufacturing goods and service companies. Those are going to start to rally off the next Trump rally, in my opinion. And something like Intel, could be the way to go. And again, the stock was up here in the 40s and the 50s. So that's what I'm saying. You give this baby a year and a half. For all you know, you might be back at like 33, 35 back here at the moving average. You know what I'm saying? Do the math. You're talking 70% returns here from this level. But let's look at stock charts real quick. I'll let you go. RSI was running up even on the news of the couple of billion coming in before this Amazon announcement. Even on the news, this run up here of over 6% on the day, RSI closed sub 50. So now with this news, maybe it's up to 60, but you and I both know that it could run even further and up to 70 and potentially 70 plus. So that's why I'm saying in the short term, see something like this retracing back to this 50-day moving average. It's probably going to end up being like, 24.5 or something. But in my opinion, probably going to run back up to that moving average and then potentially flatten out at the moving average and hang out there for a couple of weeks. But the MACD was steadily climbing, steadily climbing after the initial drop down after those last earnings. And of course, now it's going to be on the up and up on this news. Let's look at the weekly. Weekly again, we were sub 30 on the weekly. So this is why, again, while a lot of people may have been afraid, I promise you, there were a lot of other investors out there who wanted to hold some capital in a position for the next 18, 24 months. I promise you, there were a bunch of people who jumped in and took 5-6-figure positions on a brand name stock at sub 20. I promise you. Now the news is coming in. Now the pops are coming out. Now all of a sudden it's attractive again, right? Nice car going by. But RSI sitting here at about 33.5. So on the longer time frame, I mean, that is absolutely going to start climbing now, especially after the big drop and the big news. So coming back here, mid-Bollinger Band, about 27. And what we say, if we meet up here with our trend line over the next couple of days, you can see, look, you're looking at like 27.30, 27.40. So that's why, in my opinion, probably back to 24 and then 27. But I like it. Even after the news, again, I know you're potentially late because it just went from 19 to 22, 23. But in my opinion, I still say it's a buy because it didn't look that bad back here as it had the big drop. And now, obviously, it looks even better. We have billions flowing in. We have orders coming in, new contracts. It's the government. It's Amazon, right? Again, it's not necessarily that the money's coming in and the orders coming in. It's who it's coming from. So right now, again, you might think, oh, it's at 22. I'm telling you, within a couple of weeks, stock could be back at 32. You'd be surprised. And we can see we have a moving average here in the high 24s. We have a pivot point here at 23.80. In my opinion, it's going to get there. And let me check the previous pivot point is about 25.30. Yeah, but, you know, first it's going to pause there and then pause there at the moving average. So you're going to see 24, potentially 25, and then we're going to break up. But you can see also the previous support level, which obviously it broke down. Now it's resistance. But you can see, yeah, we're on the weekly. You can see we're sitting here at 32.28. And that's why I'm saying it may pause for a couple of days when it hits those other key levels, 23.80, 25.50, whatever the heck we were just looking at. But then chances are, in my opinion, it's going to fill the gap from the initial drop down at whatever, 29, and then it's probably going to get back to this level here of about 32.28. And then all of a sudden, it's going to be trending online. Intel made me so much money. Look at what Intel's doing. Everyone thought it was done. You're going to turn on CNBC. Oh, here's why this guy's taking a position in Intel. We'll talk to him after the break. All of a sudden, there's people who want to come on, give their 2 cents about Intel. They're buying Intel, right? And why? How's it happen? Like we always say. They beat it up, they bring it down, they take it out of the spotlight, just like Rolls-Royce, and then when no one's looking, all of a sudden the restructuring is going swimmingly, and losses are in check, and orders are coming in, and revenue consistently starts beating now, and all of a sudden the stock starts running. So this is why I say, trading is fun, but when we're talking about investing, really growing wealth over time, compound investing, whichever specific path you want to take. At the end of the day, the longer term investing, the Buffett method, in my opinion, really seems to be undefeated. But big news there on Intel, government funding, CHIPS Act, government orders, and of course this multi-year, multi-billion-dollar deal with Amazon Web Services. Just phenomenal news here for all you Intel shareholders, and this is why we say again, if we truly believe in a company long term, if we truly believe in a stock growth over time, then we have to deal with the short-term volatility for that long-term growth. But that's it. I'll end it there. I spoke way too long. So once again, Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. Hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.